Greetings, YouTube! The Doctor is in. Dr. Urias Papers here, coming at you with another commentary on Dungeons and Dragons. And a couple of days ago, today is the 10th of February, we got this article from Francesco Cacciatore. I love that last name, like Chicken Cacciatore. It's a great last name. But on February 8th in the morning, we got this article from Polygon, and they had done a video with Chris Perkins, who used to be one of the creative designers for Wizards of the Coast Dungeons and Dragons brand. And the title of this, I'm going to read it out, D&D's biggest missed opportunity is the secret 5e time travel adventure we'll never see, and how D&D lost the plot of its grand time travel epic. Really what this is about is how Wizards of the Coast, in the last adventure that came out for 5th edition, really screwed the pooch on doing something that had been kind of set up throughout a bunch of different adventures with these Black Obelisks. They just kind of threw that away, and then we got this really bad, very terribly written Vecna adventure that came out. Here's the cover for it. We got all this fanfare. This was about a year and a half ago or so when Vecna came out. It came out in 24. And so the article starts out talking about the mysterious obelisks popping up in different locations. So let's take a look. I went through one of my favorite AIs just to figure out if it could give me all of the references for these. And it spit them out. I checked them. They're all correct. So let's take a look at where these Black Obelisks have shown up. So for nearly a decade, Wizards of the Coast published, and this is essentially since 2014, they published adventures that had these Black Obelisks in them, and they're just kind of randomly placed in different locations. And we didn't really know what they were, but it was supposed to be part of this bigger meta plot that involved the Netherese Empire, that's out of Forgotten Realms, and Vecna. We did get a Netherese Empire book. It's terrible. It's a bunch of disjointed, discombobulated adventures. And the Vecna Eva Ruin, again, is like a big oyster hunt. If you don't know what that is, it's a thing that is in World of Warcraft where you go and get oysters for a farmer, or the garlic farmer. You go get the garlic or get the sheep or whatever. But it's a big item hunt to basically go through all of the different adventures and campaign settings that have been very famous in Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons throughout the history of the game. Not well written at all. But anyway, so here are the official locations of all of these obelisks. First one we got were Princes of the Apocalypse, Temple of the Black Earth. There was a big obelisk that's in the Ritual Hall. Then we got Out of the Abyss, Whirlstone Tunnels. There's an alien black metal obelisk that's there. Then we got Storm King's Thunder, the Nightstone, an obsidian megalith that originally stood in the town square, Tomb of Annihilation. So right before you go into the tomb itself in Omu, there is a moss-covered obelisk that's outside of the entrance to the Tomb of the Nine Gods, and there's a demon trapped in that one. There is one of these that's in Waterdeep, Dungeon of the Mad Mage, 15-foot-tall obelisk on level 22. There actually was one in Explorer's Guide to Wildemount. That is not a, per se, Wizards of the Coast adventure. It is and it isn't. It's done in conjunction with Critical Role and Matt Mercer. Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden in the Ythrin Enclave. There's a 60-foot tall obelisk there. And then Fandelver and below, which was one of the last things that they came out with, there was another obelisk. So these are the obelisks. There's some lore behind them that the AI pulled out that came out after all of these were published. I'm not really going to go over that. What I do want to talk about is what Chris Perkins said in the interview that he did. So here it is right here. In a video interview with former D&D creative Chris Perkins about Rime of the Frost Maiden, which was one of the last adventures, like the big kind of adventure path style adventures that was published by Wizards before they switched over to 2024. One of the most popular 5e adventures. I'm not sure I agree about that, but he asked him about obelisks, and then he goes to talk about the obelisks. And Rime of the Frostmaiden does mention that Vecna stole one of the obelisks at some point, and it teased that these artifacts would play a part in the Lich God's final gambit for absolute power. So supposedly the obelisks could control time. Like you could go back in time or forward in time, supposedly. So, however, the Cacciatore goes on to say that when Eve of Ruin came out, it was published in 2024. I think it was the summer of 24. It was right before all of the new 2024 books came out, which was in the fall of 24 and the winter of like the early 25. There was no trace of the obelisks whatsoever at all in Vecna Eve of Ruin. Just wasn't there. So here's what Perkins said. I asked Perkins what happened, and he said the reason it was dropped was that different people were in charge of the adventure design. So he had stepped back. I rolled off a lot of my hands-on product work to help out with other parts of the business. And so when I creatively walked away from the day-to-day adventure creation, we sort of lost the plot. So they had this long stretching plot that Chris Perkins had put in place because he was the creative director, and it was going to culminate in this Vecna adventure that we were supposed to get. And a new crew stepped in and wiped it out. Just said, we don't want anything to do with that, and wiped it out. And we have not seen anything at all about the obelisks since then. So, and the Cacciatore goes on to say, rather than 5e's crowning achievement, Vecna Eve of Ruin wound up being its biggest disappointment. I think there's a few others that are bigger than that one, like Radiant Citadel was probably a bigger one. So Perkins says, the original plan in my mind was that we would actually culminate the story by going back in time to fight the Netherese Empire. It was always on our radar to bring Netherrealm back in some way, and this was the way I envisioned it happening. Because the only way you could really fight Netherrealm again is to travel back in time, and the Netherrealm Empire was destroyed thousands of years ago in the history of Faerun. So to do anything with them, you'd have to go back in time, and you would use the obelisk to do that. This was even teased in Rime of the Frostmaiden, so where players can activate the obelisk and travel back in time. Perkins goes on and says, I was excited about the idea of a time travel adventure simply because it would feel very different from the other campaigns we had done up to that point. And I thought, given time and attention, we could do some really fun things with Netherrealm and explore a style of magic that felt different from contemporary magic. Expedition to the Barrier Peaks would be a sort of like the vibe I'd go for, where the magic is so weird it almost feels technological. If you don't know what Expedition to the Barrier Peaks is, it's one of the first adventures written for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons by Gary Gygax. Players find a flying saucer in there, and it's got a lot of science fiction stuff. It's one of the only adventures that D&D put out that mixed sci-fi with fantasy. So instead of doing this, it was a fetch quest. That's what we got. We got a fetch quest instead of having this time travel adventure. The Cacciatore likens this to Avengers Endgame. I'm not so sure I would go that far. It is what it is. But he says, imagine starting the adventure after Vecna 1. That would be interesting. And the heroes have to restore the timeline by traveling back to the age of Netherrealm. So supposedly in this plot, Vecna steals one of the obelisks and is able to go back in time, change history, and become this ultimate evil god that rules the universe. And the players are this kind of rebel group who get a hold of one of the obelisks somehow through some kind of adventure, and they travel back in time to stop that event from happening. So that actually seems pretty cool to me. It's an overarching plot. It's not a big fetch quest like the Vecna Eve of Ruin was. Cacciatore also says, more importantly, perhaps this would have been the payoff for a mystery that had been tickling players' imagination since the first Black Obelisk appeared in Princes of the Apocalypse back in 2015. So, Perkins goes on, we actually did some concept artwork on Netheril in anticipation of ending the Obelisk story there, and it never coalesced. So we didn't get it. And he moved on, and we all know he went to Darrington Press, and he turned everything over. Apparently, he turned everything over well before he went to Darrington Press. So him and Jeremy Crawford went to Darrington Press in the spring of 2025. This Vecna Eva Ruin came out about halfway through 24, so it sounds like almost a year before he left Wizards, he was done. He had pulled back, probably was concluding some projects he had with other parts of D&D, and that was it. So interesting to see that we didn't get anything. So maybe an idea that you can flesh out and put out in your adventures. I do like the idea of these Black Obelisks being everywhere. They're very mysterious, and you know, maybe you could make your own Vecna and tie this into your own adventures. But I find it interesting that Wizards just scrapped this completely and went in a whole new direction, which I don't think that they have sold very much of anything since the Monster Manual came out for 2024. All of the other stuff I don't think have done very much. And in addition to that, now they don't even have a release schedule for 2026. And it looks like we're only getting third-party stuff that have been added in. Like the last thing that was added in was the Pugilist, and that comes from a third-party vendor. That doesn't come from Wizards of the Coast. Nobody in Wizards of the Coast created that. Somebody else created that, and they paid a licensing fee for it. And so everything that we have gotten this year so far and everything that they're planning on publishing this year is going to come out on D&D Beyond, and there's no creative work from Wizards at all. So it'd be pretty cool to see this, but I don't think we're going to see it. And again, more disappointment from Wizards of the Coast. All right, that is the video that I have for everybody today. I appreciate everybody tuning in, and I will catch everybody later.